Hello and welcome to the Perpetual Traffic Podcast. This is your host, Ralph Burns, and the founder and CEO of Tier 11. And today I am not with Lauren E. Petrullo. I'm doing this one solo. It's been a while since I've actually done a solo episode here on Perpetual Traffic, but I felt it was important for you, the listener, because right now you're probably tied up with a whole lot of Black Friday, Cyber Monday stuff, which you should be. If you're not, well, that means your life is that much simpler, but probably you've got a year end or maybe even a beginning of 2025 planning that you're now doing to maybe shift the course and the trajectory of your business or your department. If you're a CMO or a director of marketing, you're listening to this show, or you're an agency, or you're a business owner. And that's what today's show is about, is making those types of decisions, because right now is a planning period for a lot of folks. And what we found last year when we talked about this, just about the same time in 2023, as we're talking about it right now in 2024, is that if you're going to make a shift, if you're going to make a change, maybe a change in your department, maybe a change in your vendor, maybe a change in your agency, you should be thinking about that and planning for that right now. Because if you wait until after the first of the year, you're then going to lose most of the quarter. So for us, when we have someone who comes in and wants to work with us, it might take a month or so for us to go through everything that's needed, which is one of the things that we're going to be talking about here today, in order to set that business up for success. So if you wait until after the first of the year, I think you'll be missing out on nearly a quarter of growth that you could otherwise plan for and get in for now. And so today's show is going to be all about the questions that I've actually fielded. I actually asked our CSO department, which is our client success division, about what are the biggest customer questions that we get? What are the biggest client questions that we get? The frequently asked questions, the common issues. Like once they're actually on board with us, what do they expect? And this is, I think, a really important thing for you to keep in mind and to also quiz your team on if you are making a change or if you do have a new initiative that you're planning on deploying in Q5 of 2024, which is the month of December. A lot of people call that Q5 and or Q1 in 2025. So I'm going to go through some of these questions here today, sort of see how this goes. Let us know what you think. And of course, if you do have questions that you want us to answer, we do have our Telegram group, perpetualtraffic.com/Telegram. We found some of the better ways to connect with folks that listen to this show is actually through LinkedIn as well. Posting on LinkedIn, then tagging myself and Lauren, because we check that every single day. And it's a big platform for both of us because we're both pretty active on it. So let's get right into the questions here. It's myself asking these questions to myself. So it's sort of a new thing here a bit. One of the big questions that we get from clients, and this is probably something that if you're making a shift, making any sort of change, is how quickly can we expect results? Very, very common question. And of course, the logical answer is it depends. But I'm going to break that down a little bit more on what it actually means when an agency or an internal team say it depends. It depends where you're at right now, and it depends on where you want to go. So let me give you one example of a client that we are starting with in December of this year, which is great because we're going to set them up for success. This is sort of an ideal scenario. A very large brand, large national brand, that one of their biggest issues was that they're in a very, very crowded market. Extremely crowded with a lot of competitors. They're probably the 9th or 10th largest in the market, but the 2 or 3 biggest competitors are they're backed by venture capital. They're in some cases, they're even publicly traded. They have lots of cash. They have funds to spend on marketing, whereas the company that we're now representing and working with, a little bit less so. They're a bit more bootstrapped. They're using the resources that they have for their marketing budget and their marketing strategy for 2025 and beyond out of their earnings, out of their retained earnings, which is the way that we've always worked things here at Tier 11. We have never taken on any debt. We've never taken on any outside private equity, and we've never taken on any even, individual accredited investor money, which I know a lot of my friends in the agency world have done. So a very different type of market. So they want to be able to spend, but not spend extravagantly. They want to be able to spend in the right ways. And what they found is that, to answer this question, how quickly can we expect results? We really feel that this is probably within 1 to 3 months they're going to see results of this fashion. And the problem that they have is that they are 9th or 10th in the market, and they need a share of voice. They need an individual specific way in which they position their product in the market. And then after that, once that's done, once we actually go through the strategy, which we refer to as the creative strategy framework of how to differentiate, do all the research, go through all the competitors, look at how their products are positioned right now, what's their potential advantages over their competitors, what are their competitors that are doing that maybe do something that's slightly different than what they do. How can we put a different spin on how they position themselves in the market? And usually that takes that ideology, that ideating of ideas, that takes anywhere between 3 to 4 weeks at minimum. And then I would say 12 weeks maximum. So in this case, with the brand, the way that they're spending, and they're looking to spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars per month, as opposed to millions per month on their marketing. Our answer to them on how quickly can we expect results was between 1 to 3 months. And the results that they would see is that they would start seeing more engagement with their social media. We're doing all their social media management. We're also doing all their paid advertising. We're repositioning them versus the competition. We're trying to make so that their brand is very distinct. Right now, it's sort of a mixture of some offline retail with some online marketing. And usually that branding, that engagement with the brand, tapping into what they currently have for an audience will take anywhere from 1 to 3 months. So those results are usually in the form of engagement with ads, maybe some conversions to a certain degree, but most importantly, you're building a foundation for future results. So that's just one example of how varied this whole thing is. Now, let me give you an example of another client which we've worked with, which we've done a lot of case studies here. We've actually done a few podcasts and a lot of Tier 11 lives on this, is they came to us about 4 months ago, and they're in the hospitality space. And their needs were very, very different. They were doing just Google as their primary mechanism, as their primary platform, and really no other social media, but going after high value, high intent based keywords, and they were having a real trouble scaling. So what we felt to answer that question for them is how quickly can we expect results? We said probably 1 to 2 months, maybe even within the first month, because all we needed to do is implement some of the strategies that we've talked about here on this show. In this particular case, it was the Google two-step strategy, which John Moran's talked about many times. Go back and listen to those previous episodes. We certainly will leave them in the show notes at perpetualtraffic.com. We felt that we could deliver significant results for them within the first 2 months. What we found is that by about the first month, we started to deliver significant results. And in their particular case, it was a actual lowering of ad spend by 27%, if I recall correctly, but an increase in sales of about 47% because their solution was far more tactical as opposed to brand. Now, phase 2 for them will be, once we have all of that dialed in, once we grab as much as we possibly can in the Google market, in the high value, high intent based keywords, as well as brand search keywords, then we will branch out with strategies that include maybe some of the ones that I initially talked about in that other example, more brand. Obviously, they are in a very competitive space, this hospitality business. They have 4 or 5 competitors. They're not number one in their space, but they're all vying for the same keywords on Google. Very different initial strategy than the other brand that's in the highly competitive space where they're in the top 10 in the 8 or 9 range. So different answer based upon a different strategy. And most of what we do in your marketing team, your agency, should start with a strategy. What is our strategy going to be to begin with? And that's quite honestly what we sell for the most part, is that's what people come to us for, that expertise. What's the strategy for me to get to, $100 million in sales? What's the strategy for me to get to 50 million in sales and maybe be in the top 5 in this highly competitive niche? The answers to that question are as varied as there are many businesses in the world. So how quickly can we expect results is always going to be a question of if there is a solid strategy in place, but also what are going to be the tactics. But more importantly, if it's more tactics than strategy, typically that time frame for results is a less period of time, maybe a 1 to 3 month, 1 to 2 month range, as opposed to if you're trying to rebuild a brand, it might be a longer time frame in which to expect results. Maybe 2 to 3 months to start seeing some initial traction. And then obviously the real traction comes between months 3 and 6 and beyond. Another example of how quickly we can expect results, another question that was asked for a current customer of ours, which we've actually talked about here on the show a few times. They're actually in the case niche, and they had a very specific goal, which was to reach 6 million in revenue in their first year. And they were very, very far from that when they came to us. And the question was, how quickly can we expect results? And quite honestly, this was sort of a combination of the two examples that I used previously. Is there was a tactical approach. We looked inside their Meta account. They're primarily advertising on Meta. They were doing a lot of brand search. They were focused on specific demographics, a lot of which were not actually purchasing from them. So we could make immediate changes within the Meta accounts. We also knew that they needed a level of creative input and creative strategy to make their brand come more alive. So there was a branding element to it, probably less so than the first example that I used. And last but not least was the most important part, was doing the research on their best, most avid avatar for their product. And in this particular case, it was people who owned firearms. So we focused on those three things. We focused on demographics. We cut out the demographics in their Meta campaigns that were just being wasted, getting a lot of clicks, but no conversions. In this particular case, it was, for the case company, oddly enough, was 65 and older. And then we redid a lot of their creatives to start focusing in on identifying that avatar, identifying that individual who owned firearms, but also brought in UGC creative, which we had our team create. And then last but not least is write ad copy and messaging that was specific to that avatar. An example would be, so the next time you're heading to the range, you want to put your favorite prized possessions with a picture of the case with weapons, obviously handguns actually inside the case itself. And that called out that avatar very specifically, as opposed to their previous ads, which were just sort of boiled chicken. Nothing wrong with boiled chicken. I'm a big fan of boiled chicken. However, it's kind of bland and it doesn't taste like much. And that's what most of their ads were. They were just sort of, hey, here's our product, go buy it type of thing. So those three things allowed us to create results for them within 3 to 4 months. So in most cases, it's anywhere between 1 and 6 months as to how quickly you can expect results. If it's, like I said, if it's highly tactical and it's just a tactic that we need to deploy very quickly, a la the, John Moran 2-step process, for example, or the 2-step strategy for Google by using max clicks that feed into T-ROAS campaigns, those tend to be a shorter time frame, and those are like the 1 to 2 month range. Most other brands are a combination of tactics plus larger brand strategy, which does involve a fair amount of research, a fair amount of testing, so that you can finally capture your voice and ultimately differentiate yourself versus all the other competitors that are in the market. Okay, one of the other questions that we get a lot from clients of ours is how often should we be doing iterations and optimizations of our campaigns. So this is a tricky one because oftentimes, on the one hand, you want the algorithms to do the work and to do the optimizations. But on the other hand, you don't want to give the algorithms too much freedom. And we're talking specifically about campaigns. This is, I know who actually sent us this question, because all we're really doing is just doing mostly management of the media buying. And then with secondary to that is strategy and then production on creative. So this is mostly media buying and creative, obviously with the data component that's entered into it as well. So the question of how often should you be doing iterations, optimizations of your campaign is directly related to how much you're spending and how large your market is. So the larger the market and the more spend, the more iterations and optimizations you should be making for your campaign as a general rule. The smaller the market, the less iterations and optimizations you should be doing for your campaigns. But all things being equal, there's never a one-size-fits-all to this. So if we look at optimizations by channel, there's going to be far more optimizations and iterations done in a typical Meta campaign or a TikTok campaign or even a LinkedIn campaign as there might be in a Google Ads campaign. Because Google Ads is largely, text written copy. There are obviously some images, especially if you're using Performance Max, but in most cases, we're not using Performance Max because Performance Max usually just sort of scoops up all the retargeting. So there's a less of a creative element to it. So when you're doing Google Ads, oftentimes it is really letting the algorithm do the work. And in the two-step strategy that John's talked about here many, many times here on the show, a lot of the optimizations are just sort of watching and seeing what's working. And in the case of that hospitality brand that we've been working on for quite some time, they have lots of individual geographies, and each individual geography, like let's say the state of California versus the state of Massachusetts, very different populations, very different seasonalities. So it's going to depend on, like, are your campaigns regional? Are they national? Are they international? Obviously, the smaller they are on the regional side or even on the local side, and if you have more of them, the more optimizations that you're going to make and the more complexity there is in the campaign. So what we typically will do is we'll do an 80-20 on regional campaigns and pick maybe the top 10 or maybe the top 20 out of 100 campaigns, focus on those because those are the most profitable, those are the most lucrative, and maybe those are the most for that particular time of year, they're best from a seasonality perspective. There's a lot of different factors that play into these types of decisions. So how often you should be doing iterations and optimizations of your campaign is largely determined by your data. And having solid data is the key to everything here. Because without those facts, without that individual information coming back to your media buyers and your creative team and your CRO team, you're not going to be able to make group decisions. You're not going to be able to make decisions on the fly that are informed. And without that data suite layer, and we haven't really even talked about the Tier 11 data suite, which does allow for a huge amount of the unknowns or the unattributeds that you're so used to seeing in all those third-party data platforms. This eliminates 90% of those unattributeds and those unknowns, or even the direct that's maybe attributed to SEO that you know is probably coming from some other channel. Unless you actually have that kind of visibility, it's going to be very difficult for you to make decisions. Now, having said that, most of the channels, Meta, Google, even Google Analytics to a certain degree, will model data to the best of their ability in order to give you a better idea. But it's never going to be 100%, and you're never going to have a real specific idea as to where each individual customer is coming from by channel. That's why you need to look at how we do it is we use media efficiency ratio, where we look at the entirety of the entire ad spend, all of the marketing budget or the media budget in this particular case, and then cross-reference that with the CRM or the e-commerce backend like Shopify and make decisions based upon media efficiency ratio as opposed to by channel. So the point is your data is never going to be 100% accurate, but you can get it to at least 50 or 60% accurate by benchmarking each individual channel, especially when things are going well, and then making data-driven decisions based upon media efficiency ratio as to what you're seeing by cross-referencing your spend in particular channels with what you're seeing in sales inside the CRM or inside your e-commerce platform like Shopify. All right, one of the last questions here that we get from our current clients, which unless you actually have a solution for this in-house, a lot of you are probably listening, you might not have a strategy for this. You might not have a resource where you can actually have UGC content created for you. And this is one of the questions that when I was at a conference last week, I got quite a few of these types of questions from e-commerce businesses at the Smart Marketer Conference in Denver, which so it's particularly relevant here. So what are the best ways to capture UGC from customers? So there's a number of different ways in which to do it. There's tools to capture it, but most importantly is this strategy, is to sub-segment out your email list. And Lauren talks about this all the time on the show, is to segment out your email list based upon your best customers. Who are your best customers? And there's a very easy way of doing this inside Shopify. If you're an e-commerce brand, if you have a back-end CRM, who are the ones that have bought from you the most? Bought from you meaning how many products they've actually bought. Who have bought your best sellers? And also who has bought from a dollar volume perspective. What are your highest volume customers by both physical product volume as well as dollar volume? And force rank all of those individuals, maybe going back a year or maybe 6 months. It depends on how big your business is. And then force rank those individuals and create sub lists within your CRM to email them specifically, especially if you are the CMO, if you are the CEO, coming directly from you is very, very impactful, is emailing those folks and asking them specifically to create UGC content for you. And there's a number of different ways in which to do this. You can incentivize them. And one of the things that I spoke to this group about just last week was incentivize them with free product. Hey, I'm going to send you $100 worth of free product in exchange for you doing a testimonial or a what we refer to as user-generated content testimonial about our individual product. And then what I usually will do is I'll have a video that will show people specifically how to do it, how to use your phone, how to actually, click the little semicircle of how to actually do a selfie. A lot of people actually don't know this. This is one of the questions that we had from this particular person that I met at this conference is that, hey, we deal with women that are over 55. They're not really even sure how to do a selfie. So I said, well, send them a video on how to do it. Make it really easy for them. Get a service like Loom, which shows videos, and then capture that exactly how to do it on your phone. There's also services that do this as well. Rave Capture is one. VideoWise is another one. Yotpo is another one. These are all tools that we've used in the past to capture UGC content. The biggest thing is that you're not going to get 100% of those people to do UGC content for you. But if you incentivize them and send them product and actually say, hey, would you be interested in shooting some videos for us if we sent you $100 worth of free product? And just respond back to this email, yes or no. And we will send it out to you, and we have obviously your name. We obviously have your address because we've sent you product before. That's a really low-tech way of doing it. It's highly manual, but however, even if you get 10 videos, you email 100 people, 100 of your best customers, and you only get 10, that is 10 pieces of content that you can use on your social media and your advertising. Give it to your agency, give it to your marketing team, which is going to be absolutely transformative for you and your business. We use UGC content at the very top of the funnel. We use it in the middle of the funnel. We use it in the bottom of the funnel. We use it in all ways Just sort of depends on what the product is, what the price point is. But UGC content right now, especially content that's not super well produced. I mean, we're talking about what Meta calls lo-fi content. Those are actually the best types of content. You don't have to have a video studio. You don't have to make it look like you're spending thousands of dollars on hiring an influencer. You can actually get your nano influencers, your micro influencers who are on your list to do this for free and or for free product. And it's the best way to get UGC content because I know it's a challenge for a lot of businesses that are out there. So that's a really easy way of doing it. That's just going to cost you time. If you want to spend money on it, there's always ways to do that. And there's a lot of different solutions that we've used in the past. We've used Billo in the past, Billo. We'll leave links in the show notes for that. And of course, you could always hire an agency that has creator content as a part of its service solution. And we just so happen to have that, which is extremely helpful. We've got a list of thousands of people that we pull from. Usually we pull from about 50 to 70 of them that have specific demographics, male, female, obviously different age ranges, what they've done in the past, what kinds of products that they sold in the past. And we tap into those 70 or so influencers, and they're nano influencers. These are small influencers, but we pay them and then they produce UGC content for our clients, and then we use those in our ads. The last thing I would say as far as UGC content is concerned is, and a lot of folks ask this question about, should I use an influencer? And my answer to that is sort of threefold. Yes, no, and maybe. And the reason I say yes, no, and maybe is that yes, definitely for what we refer to as nano influencers. So nano influencers are influencers in your market that are interested in your product and or the specific market that you serve, that have anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 10,000 followers. In many cases, less than 1,000. And these are the ones that actually are the most cost effective. They're the ones who are going to get you the biggest bang for the buck. You're not going to pay a whole lot for them. They haven't exhausted their lists of people that they sent to or their fans. And these are the ones that you're going to get a really good price with, especially if they're, like I said, they're in the smaller sort of nano influencer market. So one of the other things that I was asked at this conference, and we're asked a lot by our clients, is how do I get influencers to market my product? Well, there's sort of three answers to that. Yes, no, and maybe. And then there's probably there's four answers actually. Then there's a hard no. And let me explain what I mean by that. So there's really four different levels of influencers. There's nano, there's micro, there's macro, and then there's mega. Mega is the Rocks of the world, the Kardashians of the world. We're just going to take those out for right now because I'm going to assume you can't afford to hire them. Neither can we. And the interesting part of that is that unless it's their personal brand, you're not really going to get as good a return on the dollars that you spend in hiring those influencers as you will with the nano and the micro influencers. So the macro influencers, those are folks that are just sort of below that level of, a Kim Kardashian or, The Rock or anyone of that stature. So those folks, you can certainly get a lot of appeal, but they've also gone to their list. They've gone to their fans before with probably lots of different products. And just because they're popular doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to sell your product well. That's why I would focus in on the nano influencer market, which is usually less than 1,000 followers. These are tiny marketers, but they are very hungry. They're really interested in moving the needle for you. They want to do well so that they make money, and they're not going to charge you a whole lot. So these types of influencers are far more cost effective than anybody in the macro and or the mega influencer market. So find people that are within your niche. Let's say you sell health and beauty products. Maybe like search on TikTok, search on Instagram. for health and beauty, and then go to their individual pages. And you can reach out to them. You can DM them on Instagram. You can do the same thing over on TikTok. Really good way of making that one-to-one contact. Have maybe somebody in your marketing department do that. The next level up is the micro-influencers. We've seen really, really good traction with micro-influencers. These are people that are between 10,000 and 100,000 as far as followers. So their pricing is a little bit higher. You don't get quite as great of a bang for the buck as you do in the nano influencer market, but you will get a wider appeal. So if you're making trying to make a splash in the market, specifically, one of the examples I used before is that they really needed to make a splash in the market and differentiate themselves because they're in a highly competitive niche and they were 8th or 9th in that market. So nano influencers might not move the needle quite as much there. So micro influencers, anywhere between 10,000, maybe a couple of thousand and 100,000 followers are in the ideal range. And you can negotiate with these folks in many cases. And oftentimes they haven't burned out their list. They haven't burned out their audience with too many products. And that's one of the best things about nano influencers and micro influencers. You can get the best return on investment on it. And also you're going to have longevity with the products because they're really going to want to become brand advocates for you, especially if you develop relationships with them. So a lot of different ways to get UGC content, sort of mix like the UGC with the influencer stuff here a bit. But I think a lot of it is there's a fair amount of overlap. And of course, like I said, if you have the money to be able to do it, you can hire an agency which can tap into their own individual network and then pull out and screen all these people for you so you wouldn't have to do it. But obviously you have to make a little bit more of an investment there. And that's what we tend to do with a lot of our clients that don't have access to either micro-influencers or macro-influencers or anyone in those markets. And that's what we tend to do is we tend to go back to the influencers that we've used in the past and hire them because they're really good. They know exactly what they're doing. They've done it before. And that tends to be some of the best UGC content that we've created for clients. So let me know how you like this week's show. This is just me, no Lauren. I'm sure she would have lots to say about lots of these questions here, but these are straight from our client success division here, right from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And these are the types of things that you're probably thinking of if you're thinking about making a switch, whether it's an agency or replanning or rethinking your strategy for 2025. Those are some of the biggest questions that we get right now and doing our best to provide solutions for them to ultimately help them achieve their vision and their goals. So let me know what you think of this week's episode. We'll do more of these FAQs and common issues, as well as a lot of the questions and a lot of the problems that I'd love to do actually a show on what our prospects are saying when we go onto a discovery call, and then what we propose as solutions, which are probably the same sorts of things that are bothering you right now in your business as you come to the end of 2024 and want to make 2025 the best year yet. So we'll leave links to all the resources over at perpetualtraffic.com to make sure that you can get all the goodies that we've left there, we've mentioned here on today's show. So on behalf of my awesome co-host, Lauren E. Petrullo, who is not here today, until next show, see ya.